Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
What we call Dawson today began with one faithful couple. Dr. and Mrs. John T. Calloway had decided to set down roots in Edgewood, one of the first families to do so. The Calloways were attending a prayer service at a nearby church when an offering was taken for a new parsonage. Dr. Calloway leaned over and said to his wife, "I gave $50 and would have given $500 if the collection had been for a Baptist church." Shortly thereafter, in January 1920, Mrs. Calloway quickly recruited 5 people to organize Edgewood Baptist Church: Mr. and Mrs. W.P. Hildenbrand and Mr. and Mrs. J.B. Dismukes and their daughter, Lucy. These 7 charter members quickly set a budget of $5,500 to acquire property for a church building, and by March, a warranty deed was executed for 2 lots facing Oxmoor Road.
My family's connection to Dawson goes back to the beginning of the church in the 1920s. At that time, I had 2 family members, my great-grandmother and a great-aunt. My great-grandmother was member number 52, and my great-aunt was number 53. My great-grandmother was born in 1880, so you had people from the 19th century that affected the 20th century, much like today, people in the 20th century affecting the 21st.
The group selected a part-time pastor, Samuel Heath, a Howard College ministerial student. Described as big-hearted and friendly, Heath was in his late 20s and a veteran of World War I. Their church activities did not last long, however. Reverend Heath returned to his home in Equality, Alabama that summer, likely due to a recession that had just struck the nation.
World War I had just ended, and the economy was in a transition going from wartime economy into peacetime economy, and then there was a depression in 1921. So given that background, things were kind of put in suspense or on pause during that period of time.
It appeared as though this infant church was finished before it started. Even though their church services had come to a halt, a group of faithful women formed an organization that God would use to keep the spark for the church alive.
On June 3rd, 1921, 9 Baptist women formed the Baptist Women's Band of Edgewood, with Mrs. J.A. Coker being the first president. The purpose of the band was to promote social and spiritual welfare and to foster missionary spirit. Those 9 women that decided to form that band were the beginning of what Dawson is today.
By 1925, fueled by the women's passion for missions, Edgewood Baptist Church was ready to relaunch. On April 5th, a group of Baptists met at the Coker home across from where Dawson currently sits. 33 people from 12 families joined the church that day and would become the church's core for decades. They sang 2 hymns, bowed in prayer, and scripture was read from a 100-year-old Bible.
My name is Ines Elise Carlisle Karen. I was born and raised in Birmingham. I was born and raised practically at Dawson Memorial Baptist Church because my mother worked. I went to church with my grandmother, who was a charter member. So I went to class meetings with her, Business Women's Circle, WMU, Sunbeams, everything. You've heard it takes a village to raise a child. It took that church to raise me.
Shortly after the group's relaunch, God provided Dr. L.O. Dawson as pastor. Dr. Dawson had recently retired after pastoring a church in Tuscaloosa for 32 years. He had planned to teach Bible at Howard College and help train up the next generation for ministry, but God's providence brought him back to the pulpit to lead this young congregation.
When I think about Dr. Dawson, I think about that perfect gentleman look that he had about him. He was somebody special. But then again, he was my pastor.
Born 2 weeks after the end of the Civil War in 1865, L.O. Dawson was married to Margaret Lewis, and together they had 2 sons, Andrew and Eugene. He was a respected leader, having studied at Howard College, Southern Seminary, and Columbia University. He wrote for the religious and secular press and had many highly regarded positions, including 3 terms as president of the Alabama Baptist Convention. He emphasized family life and began his time at Edgewood Baptist with great optimism and a deep concern for missions. He was kind and gentle and loved people of all ages, especially the youth.
He thought that the kids ought to be a part of the church. He was just that kind of person. He was your friend, he was your neighbor, he was also your pastor. He knew his Bible, so he could teach you your Bible. But there was just something about him that would really make you really want to listen to what he said and do what he said. It was really a family. It really was. All those people that we list as charter members, those people, they really were, well, the best thing to say about it is they lived their Christian lives, and they passed it on to us children.
The church began planning for a building in which to meet. With the money from the building fund, other contributions, and a loan for $11,000 at 7% interest, they built the Fieldstone building, which had 11 classrooms and an auditorium that could seat 300. Its first services were held on Sunday, December 6, 1925. Members were ecstatic to worship in the new building, and strong bonds were being formed. Sunday morning services began with singing the first verse of Blessed Be the Tie That Binds and ended with the last stanza.
The first building was completed in 1925, and it was called the Fieldstone building. And it was still there when I grew up at Dawson. And in the first floor of that building, they had a large auditorium. It wasn't that large, but it might accommodate a couple hundred people. And also on the first story, they had some Sunday school classrooms. And then upstairs on the second floor, they had some additional classrooms. I can remember being in those classrooms of that old ancient building, which I viewed as ancient at the time.
Sunday school played an important role in the life of the church. As enrollment continued to increase, opportunities to reach the community did too. They launched a training program to win lost souls for Christ and held the church's first vacation Bible school. In 1928 alone, there were 28 baptisms. All this momentum slowed considerably in 1929 with the Great Depression. A budget of $9,000 in 1930 would drop to $3,900 in 1933. The building's mortgage burden was heavy, and the church struggled to pay its bills. Once again, the Women's Missionary Society helped the church not only persevere, but to grow through difficult financial times.
Soon after the church moved to the Fieldstone building, the organization of the Women's Missionary Union was in full swing. They had sponsored Sunbeams, Girls Auxiliary, GAs, Royal Ambassadors, RAs, and they even started a YWA. These women of vision, in order to pay off the building debts, held teas, bazaars, suppers, whatever they could to raise money for the building debt. They even gave their egg money and their milk money. This was before cows and chickens were outlawed in Homewood.
In 1934, Dr. Dawson came up with the Penny Building Fund, for which families received a small glass jar to save pennies each month. He explained, "We will kill the giant with little stones."
In March 1934, the church was going under. This was my dad's view of what was going on at that time. He would have been a teenager. But Dr. A.B. Harris held the $11,000 note, and he said, just pay for the interest, which was 7%. What can I do with a stone building? But the Lord led us to a gallon jug to put pennies in for the interest. The Penny Building Fund, which is what this was called, lasted until January 1943. And I relate back to the lady in the temple that contributed 2 mites. That's all that she had. And thinking that back in that time period, the money was tight. They suffered to get through day by day. Oftentimes the banks were going bankrupt and people were losing money that way. And yet pennies seem so simple.
The Lord sustained his people during these difficult years, and the work of the church continued. Dawson was blessed with a core of faithful workers who never lost heart despite the challenges of the Depression. At Christmas time in 1937, a candlelight service was first erected. Little did they know that those tiny lights flickering in the night were symbolic for the coming days. The church experienced deep grief on January 14, 1938, with the passing of Dr. Dawson at age 72 from pneumonia. His wife Margaret, too sick to attend her husband's funeral, succumbed to her illness just 5 days later. A memorial service would be held for them on April 24th, Dr. Dawson's birthday.
When Dr. Dawson died in 1938, that's when the name was changed to the L.O. Dawson Memorial Baptist Church.
I do remember when they discussed naming the church Dawson Memorial, somebody said, L.O. Dawson doesn't want a memorial. He would not like to have a memorial. And there was a big argument about whether they'd do it, but they all felt like that's what they wanted to do. Of course, I liked it.
In his 13 years at Edgewood Baptist, Dr. Dawson had become so cherished that the church voted unanimously to change its name in his honor. He was a much beloved man because he loved much. A plaque in his memory was placed in the foyer of the church years later in 1958 and bears the brief, powerful inscription, "He loved us." The little church looked to Howard College's head of the religion department, Professor James H. Chapman, to serve as interim pastor. After 6 months, the time came to call Reverend J. Ivy Edwards as full-time pastor. In June, Reverend Edwards arrived with his wife, Mary, and their 3 daughters, Anna, Mary Lois, and Ida. Daughter Rebecca was yet to be born. Like Dr. Dawson, Reverend Edwards was a graduate from Howard College. He was highly educated, pursuing advanced graduate studies in Greek, church history, and philosophy of religion. His sermons were noted for their teaching aspects and intellectual pursuits, but it was well known that he loved ministering to the young people.
J. Ivy Edwards, we called him Brother Edwards. We never called him Dr. Edwards. He insisted on all of the juniors sitting on the first 2 rows on Sunday morning, and he'd come down before the offering, and he would preach a sermon. It would be about what he was going to preach that day, but it was on their level. I learned so much about the Bible from him, and I think part of it was because he did use his Greek Bible. He would tell us about words that were in the Greek that we hadn't heard, but were used a lot among preachers, but it meant a lot to us to know what they meant.
Reverend Edwards was a pastor who enjoyed visiting people and helping those in need. He went up and down Shades Valley, knocking on doors and letting people know that he was available. Folks would often say that he loved people into the kingdom of God.
He was someone that no matter what happened, you could go to him. You know, just like he was a member of my family. And of course, he was the one that married us.
The church continued to grow under the leadership of Reverend Edwards, and with the Fieldstone building being paid off in 1939, so did the conversation to construct a new, larger sanctuary. Bids came in that were almost double the anticipated amount and were rejected. The war years presented additional challenges. Temporary solutions were put in place to alleviate the space problem. A duplex was purchased, and Scout Hall was gifted to the church. And in 1947, a chapel building in Tuskegee was purchased from the War Assets Administration. The dream of a new sanctuary would not be realized until after Edwards' tenure, and a shock to the church. After 9 years as their pastor, he resigned his role to serve a church in another state. Retired pastor Dr. William Vines would serve as interim pastor, but only for a short time, as the church would soon make one of the most significant decisions in its history. On Christmas Eve, 1947, the church voted unanimously to call Reverend Edgar M. Arundel as pastor. Edgar Arundel was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1920. He was known for his boundless energy, optimism, and passion for the Lord. Ed, as his friends called him, received his degree from the University of Richmond, where he was on the debate team, honor council, and the student paper. It's also where he met his future wife Sarah, whose father was the head of the English department. As the son of a well-respected pastor, Ed was poised to follow in his father's footsteps and would later go on to Southern Seminary. When Dr. Arundel visited Dawson for the first time, he thought there wasn't much to the little church, but he believed that God had sent him there for a reason. When he and Sarah arrived at Dawson on February 1st, 1948, with young son Doug, great jubilation was felt by all. Well, almost all. Later, Sarah Lynn and David were added to their happy family.
I came to Dawson in 1948 when my dad was called to be the pastor. And since then, I've put down some pretty deep roots.
The beginning of Dr. Arundel's tenure coincided with the dedication of the new chapel building in memory of two Dawson boys. They had been killed in action during World War II, Seaman First Class James L. Graham and Captain George L. Williams, Jr. Both had grown up at Dawson, and the dedication was a special time to honor the sacrifice made for their country. Soon it was time to break ground on the long-awaited sanctuary, and though much needed, the new sanctuary brought with it considerable debt. Mrs. Calloway was determined that the debt be paid as quickly as possible, having lived through the church's difficult times during the Depression. She was so concerned about clearing the debt that she came to Dr. Arundel and told him that she wanted him to sell her engagement ring and apply the amount to the building fund. Dr. Arundel objected, but Mrs. Calloway insisted this act was not for him but for the Lord. So the ring was sold for $2,000, a magnificent sum in those years, and applied to the building fund as she wished.
I was only 6 years old when the sanctuary was built in 1951, so I don't remember a lot about it except that it was so big in comparison to where we had been. And I know that my dad wondered if we had made a mistake those first few Sundays, because he said one Sunday he could have fired a shotgun in there and not hit anybody. So, it was a big step of faith for those people in those days, but it was just a few years after that that we were building the transepts to make room for more people that God had sent.
Dr. Arundel's love for people was evident in his day-to-day ministry. He was a young, dynamic leader and a gifted preacher of God's Word. On March 18, 1951, the doors were opened and Arundel preached his first of thousands of sermons in this building.
As a young kid, it was all I could do to make it through the sermons. But as I grew older, then the sermons started to speak to me. And I still remember when I was almost 8 years old that one of his sermons just tugged at my heart, and I went down to accept the Lord.
Every year on his anniversary, his church anniversary, the congregation would vote a week or two ahead of time on the sermon that they would like to hear on his anniversary Sunday. The most popular sermon, based on my understanding, was a sermon called The Sinking of the Titanic.
This morning I tell of two terrible tragedies: the sinking of the Titanic under the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and the sinking of millions of lives under the icy waters of greed and materialism.
It was a real evangelistic message that took off from the facts surrounding the voyage of the Titanic and all the warnings that were ignored.
Warning after warning, and the Titanic paid no attention to it. The Bible warns the lost person. Isaiah 55:6, seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near.
He preached it many times at Dawson, at revivals, and various meetings all over the country and even outside the country. But I think if I had to name my favorite, it was called What the Love of God Will Not Do. And it had 3 points. The love of God will never let you down. The love of God will never let you go. And the love of God will never let you off. Because love like that demands a response from us. I think we all have a hole in us that's longing for a love like that. Human love's not like it. Our love for each other, as much as we love each other, we always let the other one down. And God's not like that. He's always there. He always loves us, and he's just waiting for us to come to him.
And so, fueled by their love for God and by the example of love set by their pastor, the young congregation with their new sanctuary ready to be filled had a mind to work and were willing to serve. Communication from the church was warm and welcoming, and friendliness in the pew was part of the culture. The kind of friendliness that comes only from the hearts of dedicated people who love the Lord and enjoy helping others feel at home in their church.
It was the biggest church I had ever been in or seen. But they made me feel so at home, and it felt like a small church because of that. Several nights later, as I was grading papers in my little bedroom, the phone rang, and it was Dr. Arundel. I just couldn't believe he called me, but he did. And he said, "Mary, I see that you have visited our church, and I hope that you will join next Sunday." So I did.
I have been a member of Dawson since approximately 1963. My family moved to Birmingham when I was in the 6th grade. Dr. Arundel was admired, respected, loved, but yet he was incredibly approachable. My mom and dad and many of the other adults would call Dr. Arundel preacher. That was his name in the hallways, or if you ran into him out at the grocery store. I actually thought it was his first name for many years. I'd been to many other churches. My family moved constantly. Every 2 years, my dad was transferred to another place. So to really find a preacher who was so approachable, that spoke a lot to me of what true Christianity, truly living your love for God was like.
When I came to Dawson, my mother was one of Dr. Arundel's secretaries. So one day when I was older, to a teenage age, and my mother was still there, she got very sick and had to stay at the hospital. And so I was there at the hospital, and I turned around and I saw Dr. Arundel and his wife walking up to me. And they took me home to their house that day and said they would help me in any way that I needed to.
Not long after Dad got here, Dawson had been established for a while, and back in that day, they had, men's Sunday school classes that had been going on for years, and women's Sunday school classes that had been the same with no changes for years, and any talk of changing the status quo got a reaction from the people who just were used to that way of doing things. And Dad thought that the church would be better served if they had some couples classes. But he got resistance from one of the laymen in the church who was one of the biggest givers to the church. And he called my dad up one day and he said, "Arundel, if you mix up those Sunday school classes, I'm not ever giving another dollar to the church." And Dad said, "I'm sorry you feel that way, and we certainly would miss your participation, but I feel like the Lord's leading us in this direction, and this is what we're going to do." A day or two passed, and he got a call from this layman, and the layman said, "Arundel, I want to give you a car." And he gave my dad a new car to use for a year. He was a car dealer, and every year, for as long as I could remember after that, he would give my dad another car. And he was basically saying, "You were right to do what the Lord wanted you to do." And my dad remembered that the rest of his ministry. He took comfort from that because, there were other hard decisions that he had to make in his ministry, and he remembered that one and how the God was faithful. So that gave him the ability to trust for the future.
Dr. Arundel led the church to pursue many evangelistic strategies. Some, such as the bus ministry, came and went. Many others, however, such as the college ministry and a new recreation ministry, proved fruitful and the church grew. Dawson's music ministry flourished under the leadership of Lester Barker, Dawson's first full-time minister of music, and his wife, Dot, church organist. The Barkers believed that singing was to honor God, giving only Him the glory. In 1962, Lester and Dot left to take roles at Shades Mountain, making way for Marvin Spry to come on staff. The music ministry continued to grow under his direction. Throughout the 50s and 60s, God grew the church into one of the largest congregations in Alabama. God's word was preached, Sunday school was a priority, and the age of television had arrived.
My dad's excitement was contagious, and so he had a great vision for providing space for the people that he had confidence God was going to send. So we built a sanctuary, and then we built the 2 wings on each side, and then we had to build the far east wing east of where the east wing was. And then finally the north building. He started the TV ministry and the rec center, which were not done in his day. And he had a lot of other ideas that didn't work as well, like the bus ministry. but he was always trying something new and he wasn't afraid to fail. He had a lot of foresight to see the potential that television had for reaching people for the Lord. So when Channel 42 came in, it was the third channel in Birmingham. There were only 3 channels for people to watch. So it was a big deal for Dawson to work out that long-range arrangement with Channel 42 that they've had ever since then. My dad loved children. He focused on children. He would have children's sermons sometimes. He'd have them come up to the front and he would speak to the children. And one of the things he initiated was the Arundel Gang.
The Arundel Gang, I was only a member of it for 1 year, but I could tell that it had been really instrumental to many of the children my age. So the Arundel Gang was for kids in 1st through 6th grade. And the purpose of it was for you to know Dr. Arundel, but most importantly, for you to know God. Dr. Arundel wanted to make sure that you understood how important worship was and how important it was to use your Bible. So he would have booklets printed that we would keep notes of what he was preaching on. There were verses that we would look up and write. And as you accomplished and reached goals within that little booklet in the campaign, then you would have metal buttons that you could wear. And oh my goodness, you wanted to make sure you got a button so that you could wear those to let people know that you were a part of the Arundel Gang. It was just another way of this great man who connected with people in everyday living. It really made an impression on me as a young kid.
In the 1970s, the church celebrated its 50th anniversary, including a well-received reenactment of its founding. It also celebrated Dr. Arundel's 25th and 30th anniversaries as pastor. This decade brought even more opportunities to reach and welcome the lost. Missions continue to be an important emphasis in all areas. From backyard Bible clubs, chapel choir tours, and a new recreation ministry, many of these missional ministries were geared toward young people.
My family grew up at Dawson. My parents met at Sanford and found Dawson as their church home. And when I was born, I was the baby of the week in 1969 in the nursery. They had a little window there where everybody could come by and look at the new babies. And those are some of my first memories in the nursery at Dawson. I was a member of the Arundel Gang. A lot of my time growing up was spent at the rec center. I would say I was raised at the rec center. Our moms would drop us off at the rec center when school got out in May and pick us up before it started back in the fall. Barty Acton and Bob Gladney supervised us loosely during that time. We figured out how to get drinks out of the drink machine without paying sometimes so that we could have extra soft drinks. We grew up going to Sunday school, participated in Vacation Bible School, went on mission trips, were in the high school choir and in the children's choirs growing up. They used to have training union on Sunday nights, so we were there every Wednesday and twice on Sundays. Choir tour was a big part of our high school and through the chapel choir, and we would get on a bus and drive for hours and hours to some location like San Antonio, Texas, or Toronto. There were a lot of things about choir tour that were important and meaningful, and of course the service opportunities were great, but for me it was the music and singing together in the choir where, you know, the words that we had memorized and the meaning of those words sort of gets imprinted on your heart.
The unchanging truths of Scripture would become paramount for Dawson during the 1980s. As several decades of leadership under Dr. Arundel were approaching an end, turbulent winds were on the horizon and difficult changes lay ahead for God's people at Dawson. But God was always working, and he would accomplish his purpose.
Dr. Arundel had so many good sermons. You know, we printed a lot of them and made them available. There were a lot of them that meant a lot to me, but the one that sticks in my mind the most, he gave an example of trees that grow near the seacoast have a much stronger root structure because of the constant wind pressure. And he used that as an example to come up with his statement that obstacles in the way of the strong are essential. You have to face them and overcome them to be strong. And our church, unfortunately, was going to have to face that truth later on. God probably put that into him because he knew years down the road we needed to understand how to use those obstacles that we faced, how to overcome them and become stronger while doing them.
In 1981, I became the WMU director for Dawson. What a wonderful opportunity to serve further. We had about 600 Girls Auxiliary, Mission Friends, and ACT teens participating in Dawson missions at that time. And it was during that time that I had a chance to visit with Lynn Barrett. She and her husband Jerry were Dawson missionaries that were serving in Hong Kong and were home on furlough. When they came home on furlough in 1980, we had no place to house them. She shared how difficult it was. In Birmingham, there were only 2 missionary residences, and they all stayed full all the time. And so I went to Dr. Arundel and shared the vision that the Women's Missionary Union had for a house. And he committed to help us. God had a hand in everything that happened because Dawson had purchased a lot adjacent to the church for a parking lot. But the city council, as we know, doesn't often approve extra parking lots, and they didn't approve that. And Dr. Arundel said that would be a perfect place to build a missionary residence. So in 1983, construction was begun, and in November of 1984, the house was dedicated and the first missionaries moved in.
Claire Gwaltney and I had the joy of working on the first missionary house. And through the years, countless missionaries have lived in those 2 houses.
We began to realize there really was a need. And so in 1987, we built a second missionary residence because the first one was full for years to come. And through that time, we've been able to interact with these missionaries to learn what they're doing and to pray for their needs and to help support their needs as they've come to us and ministered to us as we've been able to minister to them.
I am David Eanes. I've been serving as Minister of Children and Families at Meadowbrook Baptist Church. It's been years since I've been a member, but I still feel like I'm family. You know, we were all families, but we were also a family of families. Dawson Memorial had purchased Camp Dawson down in Calera, and so I was a day camp counselor, teaching Bible stories and things to a little group of second graders. I really think God used the combination of me looking up at those that were older than me in the chapel choir, and then that just a few months later having little kids look up to me. He began to shape my heart for children's ministry, and I fell in love with it. I absolutely fell in love with children's ministry. I'm in large part who I am today because of those early years and how God shaped me through people young and old, people like the 2 Bobs, Bob Hatfield, Bob Gladney, Jenny Glass, Jan Jones, so many others who invested in me and saw a love for kids in me. And I get to enjoy my calling to children's ministry daily as children's minister today.
In January 1984, Dr. Arundel formally announced his retirement after 36 years at Dawson. Even after stepping away from full-time pastoral duties, Dr. Arundel's continued faithfulness in serving God and loving people never stopped.
He retired from preaching, but he undertook what we called his tomato ministry. He liked to grow tomatoes in his garden, and sometimes if he didn't have any tomatoes, he would go to the farmer's market and he would buy a box of tomatoes, and then he would go around from house to house and he would give tomatoes to anybody that would take them because he just loved people, he loved being with people, and he loved to give. So after retirement, after interim pastorate, the tomato ministry.
In all that he did, Dr. Edgar M. Arundel insisted that God be given the glory. God's faithfulness to Dawson was evident in his providing of a strong pastor and a loving staff to lead his people. Ed and Sarah's devotion to God and to his people is a legacy of faith held dear by many. In 2010, a decision was made to name the proposed new education building after him as a testament to his love for the Lord and for the children and youth. Yes, Ed, to God be the glory indeed. With the retirement of such an esteemed and beloved leader, such as Dr. Arundel, Dawson faced a period of uncertainty that had not been experienced for some time. Dr. Landrum Level, president of New Orleans Seminary, stepped in unofficially as interim while the church began the search for a new pastor. With a lengthy 2.5-year interim, a storm was brewing of dissension and distrust.
At Dr. Arundel's retirement after 36 years, it was going to be tough to find just the right person. So of course we had a pastor search committee, and I was on that committee, and we worked for a couple of years really, and just really struggled with finding the right combination. And finally our committee decided to resign and let a new committee start afresh. We weren't led to the right person, or the right person wasn't led to us. You never know. We might not have been listening carefully enough. No, the search committee was formed, and a lot more quickly than the process was for the first time, Altus Newell was called.
After 2 different search committees, Dr. Altus Newell accepted a unanimous call to become Dawson's 5th pastor, beginning his tenure in March of 1987. Dr. Newell, a graduate from Mississippi College and Southern Seminary, arrived with his wife Diane and their 3 children, Sarah Elizabeth, Amanda, and Justin, from Switzerland, where he had been serving as president of a Baptist seminary. The welcoming church family was full of excitement and anticipation. People immediately took to the friendly pastor with a heart for the lost and new ideas for door-to-door evangelism. There were many firsts during Dr. Newell's time at Dawson. The first directory was printed, the first D-Now took place, and a new intercessory prayer ministry began. The name of the church bulletin was updated to the Together, and the observance of Advent was implemented. Both of these remain Dawson traditions today. Many wonderful things were happening, and weekly attendance and church membership were growing. But as time went on, questions arose from some members, and accusations were made against the pastor. This unrest stemmed from certain staffing decisions, a difference in leadership styles, questions about church finances, and other items of contention.
During the period of that vacuum in leadership, there was some unrest and a little bit of dissension that had kind of started boiling up, and Altus happened to be the one here that took us through that time. As it turned out, it was tough. Everything became a big deal. I mean, he did some things that he got criticized for that if somebody else had done them at another time, it'd been fine.
I came on staff during the interim between Dr. Arundel and Dr. Newell, and we were all thrilled that we were finally getting a pastor. And the church had held together and had been diligent in praying for a new pastor. While Dr. Newell was there was a difference in leadership style and direction of the church that not everyone agreed with.
Dawson had always been full of unity and love, but now sides were taken and emotions ran high. Large groups of people were leaving to join other churches.
My dad was no longer the pastor there, but I was still an Arundel. And so, not wanting to be, I turned out to be the focus of a lot of attention. And I didn't want to do anything to hurt the church. So Janet and I thought it wisest for us to just leave the church, even though we loved it. That was the reason we left, even though it was really painful.
Sandy and I made the decision to stay, although at times I felt so bad, wondering what was going to happen this Wednesday night or what was going to happen this Sunday.
The controversy, as it has been called, was a time that no church family hopes to ever experience. As church leaders and deacons worked to restore relationships, God again was faithful and provided for his people.
I think there were a lot of questioning God. What's going on? What can I do? Can I make a difference? Why are we going through this? Why is Dawson experiencing this? I mean, this whole time I would say was bathed in prayer. Because that's the only way we survived, was our faith and our belief that God had a plan and that he could see what we could not see.
In the midst of those troubles, there were many blessings that while it was happening, it was difficult to see. But as you look back, you can see that spiritual lives were growing deep. We all said we trusted God. So how does that look like in the midst of indecisiveness, of I'm not sure what the future is going to be like? There were people who had been in life group and in different organizations of the church who stepped up to leadership. They were these hidden gems in our midst that we didn't even know about. And here they were, bright stars shining at a time that there was more darkness at times than there was light.
I just saw God's faithfulness in just the family culture that was created. That's the thing that I think about the most. I remember Dale Corley passing away in the summer of my junior year, and just how we rallied around his kids who were in the chapel choir, rallied around his family.
So when I was in college in 1989, my dad died. It was obviously a shock to us. He was only 47 years old. One of the first people that I remember coming to my house was Bob Gladney, and we were surrounded by our Dawson friends and family who took care of us during that time. I think that there was some divine intervention that brought unity out of that division.
During those difficult times, God's faithfulness was always there. Now, does that mean that everything's going to be rosy and balloons? Absolutely not. But His grace is sufficient. And to know His word and to believe it is, even if you can't see His hand, you know His heart. So you stick with those scriptures and you stick with the encouragement that He does provide. And if you don't see it, then ask and pray that He will give you the eyes of faith to see His hand at work. And He does give it. He does give it.
Ultimately, Dr. Newell resigned in January 1990, a little more than 3 years after his arrival. The conflict did succeed in splitting the church family during this time, but God continued to work through those who stayed at Dawson, as well as those who left.
With his departure, a couple of things got started in a little different way. During Altus's time, one of the great things he wanted to do was for us to start a church out in the Highway 119 area. It was not going to work because too many people misunderstood. They didn't take it as a new church start, but they took it as someone trying to move Dawson, to shut it down in Homewood. That was never the intention. Well, as a result of not being able to do it, a few people who were passionate about that new church left and actually started the church at Brook Hills. So I say that is a wonderful thing that happened. I wish it could have happened under better or easier circumstances for us, but the church at Brook Hills is a great church.
God still had plans for Dawson too, and provided as interim pastor the gentle and wise Dr. Ralph Langley to help the church family begin to heal.
Ralph was definitely God's man at God's time for our church. And he brought us back. He really brought the right kind of harmony back and taught all of us how to really love each other again. And I think with Ralph and the 1 year he was there, he got us ready for Gary Fenton.
On January 20th, 1991, Dr. Gary D. Fenton preached a sermon at Dawson in view of a call. Standing at the front of the sanctuary that evening with his wife, Alta Faye, and their 3 daughters, Amy, Sarah, and Leah, he accepted the invitation to become Dawson's 6th senior pastor, leaving First Baptist Church of Tyler, Texas.
To be real honest, when we moved here, we were really hesitant. My family loved Tyler, Texas. I enjoyed Tyler, Texas, but we really felt called to Dawson.
Dr. Fenton grew up in the Church of the Nazarene, but he became a Baptist in 1969 when he joined the First Baptist Church of Oklahoma City, led by Dr. Herschel Hobbs, a respected theologian and author of the Baptist Faith and Message. What attracted Gary, as he liked to be called, was the wonderful grace of God, the priesthood of the believer, and the autonomy of the church.
It is as you trust Him, as you daily follow Him, you start to see His hand on your life. And then there are days in your life when you wonder, is God really here? Have you ever looked at the rainbow? The rainbow is not just simply a sign that the rain is over. It's a visual symbol to Christians that God's covenant even continues to this day.
Dr. Fenton's sermons would deal with everyday, practical Christian living based on Scripture. He preferred working in front of the podium, which enabled him to feel closer to the congregation. Dr. Fenton, known for his warm and good-natured personality, was a leader and motivator with deep concerns for the hurting and needy. He was an enthusiastic worker who could often be seen at the church 7 days a week. Getting to know the people of Dawson was always a priority, and Dr. Fenton famously had a knack for remembering names after just one encounter.
When Dr. Fenton was hired, it was big news at Dawson, but I was away at school. So I remember inviting him down to a basketball game in Tuscaloosa. And he drove down on a Saturday. We went to the game together, and that's the first time I got to spend time with him. Alabama won that game. It was great. Arkansas was ranked #1. I realized later how unusual it was for him to come down on a Saturday when he's getting his sermon ready for Sunday morning.
Dr. Gary Fenton was a wonderful, cutting-edge vision casting person. And when he came to Dawson, he had fresh eyes. He could see the needs. He could see where we needed to go as a staff and a family of faith.
One of the things that I observed soon after I came was there was not a central vision at Dawson. Part of the reason there was not a central vision was they had been having some difficulty, and they were really thinking more about how do we keep things going rather than are we going in the right direction. Roger Meadows was a key player in the process that we used. And we put together a long-range planning committee. We did not announce that, hey, we need to find a vision and a vision as a result of it. But we pulled about 20, 25 of people who were leaders or emerging leaders in the church. We went around the room and asked everyone to say, what brought you to Dawson? How did God lead you to this church at this time? And then, without referencing the division, the next question we asked was, why did you stay? It gave me an opportunity to hear how God had used the past to bring people to the present. And it was a very healing process. It was redemptive, where all you heard was positive things about what God had done, rather about the division and the dissension and things that had gone wrong. It was good for my soul to hear that, but it was also good for those 28 people in the room.
It's also been said that music is good for the soul. And at Dawson, music and worship have always played a significant role in the life of the church. Under the leadership of Dr. Bob Hatfield, who had been minister of music since 1978, traditions like the annual candlelight service encouraged the congregation time and again. And new traditions such as Sing Out America, performed on the church steps each year, reached the community with messages of God's love. Perhaps the most popular and widely traveled group at Dawson was the Chapel Choir and its annual mission tour.
We took that and saying, assuming that God's still working in the same direction that He has been working in our church for several years, let's think about what we should do next. Out of that, we began working on a vision and mission statement. One of the key events that had happened at Dawson since I was there happened within my first month. There was a small tornado went through the area. The storm took some shingles off, and across the street, the house burned. It was struck by lightning. That was on Friday morning. The chapel choir did their mission trip that year during spring break. But on that Sunday night, there was the home concert. Toward the end of the concert, the choir sang, "Will those who come behind us find us faithful?" It was interesting. I was sitting on the front row, and I was glancing back through the congregation. That was almost a redemptive moment in the church. The church had been through a major storm 2 years ago, the storm of dissension and division, and it had survived. Now the visible storm, which was the shingles, and there was the feeling that God had been faithful to us. Would we be faithful to Him? Well, jump back 2 years later. We're in the long-range planning committee. We're struggling with different things, to different versions of vision statements. And then a couple of us mentioned, do you remember that night, approximately 2 years ago, when we sang, "Will those who come behind us find us faithful?" And there was almost a unanimous feeling that even though people hadn't thought about it, that was really a key moment in the healing of the church. And as a result, we said, that needs to be our vision, not to be the biggest church in Birmingham, not to be the fastest growing, but to be faithful. And that the question that we need to ask before we begin any ministry is, are we being faithful to God's calling? That's how we came out with the vision statement, to be found faithful as God's people.
Those days when Dr. Fenton first came, I would say the first decade, it was lots of visionary thinking, visionary ministry, visionary just endeavors. I mean, there were times I thought, whoa, but yet the Holy Spirit would take us there and make it happen.
Roger Meadows, who I mentioned earlier, who was working with us on the long-range plan, he was a graphic designer as well. And one of the things that he did was said, let me do some just initial drawings on a logo. One of the things that he said as he was drawing it, he wanted to show that Dawson was traditional church, but it was also in the process of changing. And that swirl towards the end of what we call the Dawson D. It was sort of to indicate that we're traditional, but we're not tied to tradition. We're open to the Lord's leadership, but also wanted the cross to be at the very center of it, because the cross is the center message of the Christian faith. And if there is no death, resurrection of Jesus, there's no reason for us to be Christians at all. It's not just about moral living, it's about transformation.
With a renewed vision and mission, God led the community of faith on a journey through many transformative ventures. New ministries began for all ages, parents and their children, singles, and college students. Additional training, Bible studies, and care groups were formed for discipleship and spiritual growth. Meaningful changes also happened with worship. Family dedications would no longer happen as a group. Each family would be invited to the platform where they and the church would commit to bringing the child up in the Christian faith.
Tiffany and Sean, you truly have received a gift from God. Every gift from God brings with it a responsibility. And your responsibility will be being God's representatives in Will's life.
The word family would become an important key in conversations. The congregation was often reminded that the church was not a building or an institution. It is a family of God that is always growing and expanding and is made up of multiple generations.
Don and I were married at Dawson. Then Allison, our daughter, and her David were married at Dawson. Then Michael, who was the baby, he and Carmen were married at Dawson. And then all the family was working so much there together. It's just such a blessing to me to know that this is my two children who want to sit with me right here every Sunday they can to sing the glory of God. And when we sing and the whole sanctuary sings with us, it's so amazing.
Hi, I'm Mary Claire Powell. I've grown up in Dawson. I've always loved being a part of it, like seeing my mom and dad there, seeing my grandparents there, growing up with my cousins there. It's always really fun to be a part of a big family, both church and actual family.
There's a dynamic at Dawson that does encourage the multi-generational part of it. There are some occasions that really strike me when my young friend Anna Rogers is on the platform with me, which happens every now and then. There is 50 years difference in our ages, yet we are doing the same thing, participating in worship.
One of the things that I really enjoy is the difference of the generations and how they work together.
It works the same way in ministry, not just with worship, but we're able to minister in a lot of ways with a lot of different kinds of people coming together to add their skills and their gifts to the gifts and skills of others.
The faith community also grew to include different Sunday services. A separate contemporary worship service developed, introducing new music styles, and in 1994, Pastor Byron Mascara was invited to establish Dawson's Hispanic congregation, its first church within a church.
In 1994, I was working at my local church in Quito, Ecuador, and then is why I received the call from Dawson in order for me to plant a Hispanic church. When I came over, we realized the Hispanic community here is people with a lot of needs. That really helped us to understand that we have opportunities here. We have seen probably hundreds of people making profession of faith. We are with high expectation about what is next.
As Dawson's family of faith was growing, like any family, more space was needed. The church successfully launched multiple building campaigns, and by the end of the decade, it completed a new family recreation center, along with a 640-car parking complex, updates to the fellowship hall, the kitchen, the north building, and an expansion of the sanctuary vestibule.
When I first moved here in my very first deacons meeting, I think I shocked the deacons, didn't intend to, but I shocked them. I said, after being here a month, I've realized our church is at least 12 to 15, $18 million in debt. And everybody's shocked because the church didn't have any indebtedness. And I paused and I said, we're indebted to the past and the future. We've allowed things to deteriorate. We need to bring them up to date, and then we've got to prepare for the next generation. So the first campaign was building bridges. We did the fellowship hall first and the vestibule. Second campaign paid for the parking deck. Third campaign paid for the recreation center. And then we did a fourth campaign, which was remodeling of the north building. Every stage of that, God has been faithful to His people who have tried to be faithful to His calling.
At the turn of the millennium, Dawson celebrated 75 years of God's faithfulness. Now unified and willing to serve, the church family was ready for new opportunities to meet the physical and spiritual needs of those around them. It also embarked on one more major building campaign, the construction of the Arundel building, which stands today where the Fieldstone building once stood. Remarkably, giving to the missions budget actually increased as members expressed their desire to do even more for missions.
When the church was going through the division, as churches always do, when you're hurting, you look inward. When there's no hurt, you look outward. And the church during this time of division had really looked inward. And now we had an opportunity to look and see who's in our neighborhood, who lives here. It was an exciting time for the church.
Already a church family with love of missions in its DNA, the focus would now turn outward, and Dawson hired its first full-time minister of missions, Ben Hale.
In 2001, we began to think about how we could engage and involve every church member in some type of mission service beyond the walls of our church.
Suddenly there was this resurgence of missions that was way beyond anything that Dawson had ever done before.
We began to see the numbers of our mission projects increasing, the number of people going on mission projects increasing.
I was watching the news on December 26, 2004, and they were showing this horrible devastation of a tsunami in Southeast Asia. So I went to Dawson and spoke with Ben Hale and shared with him that I felt like God was wanting me to go, and was He by any chance putting a team together. Just unbelievable destruction all over. And I felt like we brought God's love to those people. They asked me on occasion, many times, why are you here? And I just simply said, the God that I love and serve has placed a love for you in my heart. That's why I'm here, because I love you. It was an incredible experience, but then it carried on after. And they kept going back and going to different places, but always reconnecting with same people, and just all kinds of ministries as a result. So it's been an incredible journey to have with Dawson.
Our first large partnership was with a ministry called Living Water Community Transformation.
My name is Ann Rao, and I am the founder and the president of Living Water Community Transformation. This is a Christian community development program, and the Lord called me to work with South Sudanese people actually more than 20 years ago. And interesting, He also called the people at Dawson to do the same thing at the same time. And we didn't know each other. I had no idea they were planning medical trips to go to South Sudan, but we started working together pretty quickly. And through that partnership, we have seen God move in amazing ways.
With the passion and excitement for missions continually building, Dawson was ready to take its next step of faith in 2015.
The energy and excitement we saw that built from every mission trip, that was really making a significant impact in our church. We also recognized we've gone through, I guess, 5 building programs. What if we designed a campaign that was just like the building campaigns, but not 1 cent of it stayed here?
So we developed that project. It ultimately became known as Go Love Tell. And we had 5 projects which were international and national and local. One of those was in Northeast Africa. We partnered with a missionary couple who were from Dawson, starting a health clinic. We supported them by providing resources for a farm that they were using as an outreach program. We also paid for electronic devices to be used to share the gospel. In Tanzania, we partnered with a missionary medical doctor who was already serving there in a Christian hospital. But they needed to expand that hospital to serve more children. So we paid the cost of building a pediatric wing in that hospital. In Southeast Asia, we partnered with a missionary couple who also had strong Dawson connections as well. And there we started an English language school, which is an incredible opportunity, a way to reach people of Muslim backgrounds mostly, and tell them about the gospel. Nationally, we went to the state of Maine, one of the least Christian states in the United States, and we committed to plant 5 new churches. And then locally in Birmingham, we decided to serve a community that was not far at all from Dawson, but needed all kinds of additional resources. And we began there by working in a local school where our people went and volunteered. We bought books and we bought other resources for that school as a way to reach out to those families in that community. But that grew into what today we call the Learning Center. So those 5 projects, we believe, accomplished the model that we're trying to follow, which is Acts 1:8, to go throughout the whole world.
One of the best known results of Dawson's mission strategy over the past several decades has been the development and the creation of 3 local ministry centers. So we serve adults at the Learning Center, helping to meet their educational needs. We serve children and indirectly their families by providing physical and spiritual needs at Kids Connection. And at Empower, that Dawson started in the early 1990s, we provide free medical care. These ministry centers serve hundreds of people on a weekly and monthly and annual basis here in our city.
After 25 years of faithful service, Dr. Fenton preached his last sermon as Dawson's senior pastor on Sunday, August 28, 2016. Dr. Fenton continues to exemplify Dawson's mission of becoming and helping others become faithful servants of Jesus Christ.
Dr. Fenton was just such a marvelous minister. Everybody loved and loves him. When he announced that he planned to retire, I was asked to serve for a second time. I thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this again, but I felt like I should say yes, and I did. And we met every week, late into the night, praying, reading scriptures, singing hymns, and just pleading for God to show us the right person. And when it became a year and people kept saying, well, have you found anybody that begins to measure up? We would say, just try to be patient. We are really trying to follow the Lord's leading. And finally, one young pastor from Clinton, Mississippi, and it was just wonderful. And so we did extend a call, and we were so happy when Pastor David accepted. Just been so thankful for God's timing for him and for us.
I'm David Eldridge, and
Since September of 2017, I've had the privilege of serving as a senior pastor here at Dawson. I'm married to Danielle. We've been married for 25 years. We have 3 children, Hayden, Luke, and Jonathan.
Dr. David Eldridge and his family arrived in September 2017 as Dawson's 7th senior pastor. The transition was seamless as he continued to lead the church through the Go Love Tell campaign and even further mission endeavors.
To see the transitions that we've had, some were struggles years ago, but this latest transition in pastoral leadership that we've had is so encouraging to me.
Every time you walk into our sanctuary, one of the central sort of architectural features of our worship space is to be able to look up over the baptistry and to see etched above it, "To be found faithful as God's people." And one of the things a few years ago that we determined is that we need to have fresh language to be able to express what exactly does it mean to be found faithful as God's people. And so we wanted to say that in a way that was both descriptive of who our church has been for decades, but it's also aspirational. Who is God calling us to be? So when we think about what does it mean to be found faithful as God's people, well, God's word is our authority, prayer is our priority, worship is our response, discipleship is our focus, and missions is our passion.
Every time you make a change in leadership, you are concerned about the next generation of leaders. And I have been so pleased that the next generation of leadership has continued the trend that we have. And so that we have not lost momentum of what Dawson has been all about. I believe that what we did with Go Love Tell, as wonderful as it is only the beginning of what God has in store for us.
After the end of our first 5 years of Go Love Tell, with the remaining funds that were left because of the generous giving of our people, we were able to develop a Hispanic church planting residency. And what that means is Go Love Tell, which was a 5-year ministry effort, actually because of generous giving and sacrificial service, turned into an almost 15-year project that will result in the creation and the support for at least 5 new Hispanic churches.
The church planting residency program has been one of the blessings of being here in Alabama, being with Dawson and Vida Nueva. It's an opportunity for families that feel called to Alabama to plant a Hispanic church, to spend 1 year with us in residency, in training and preparing them to be able to plant a successful church. The first 2 are doing well. Both of their congregations are worshiping together. They have Bible studies. They're running approximately 40 to 50, which is really good. And both of them had tremendous potential to continue to grow and impact the Hispanic communities in those cities.
The previous generations of Dawson leaders and members and staff would not be able to fathom what God has done among us and through them and through their early efforts. They were dreamers, they were builders, they were faithful believers, but now that we see what God has done with the seeds that they have planted and the fruit that has come from those seeds, they would truly be amazed at God's faithfulness to them.
Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands.
Our response to that dream or that desire is to make sure that we continue our pursuit of faithfulness to the Lord, and we can dream about what our children and grandchildren will see and experience because of what we have the privilege of doing today.
All my life you have been faithful.
We're inheritors of those that have come before us and the faithfulness of those that have come before us. We're not here because we've invented any of these things, nor did we conjure these things up. The resources that we have, the buildings that we have, these are things that other people at another time said, God, what are you calling us to do? I think it is my prayer as the pastor is that we would be found faithful in this moment, in this time, to say, God, we can look back over 100 years of that Hebrews chapter 12, that great cloud of witnesses that threw off the weight that, as the writer of Hebrews says, the weight that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And what did they do? One of the consistent things that they did as the people of God that called Dawson home is that they fixed their eyes upon Jesus, the author and the perfecter of their faith.
All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good.
I have memories of a sixth grader, of people who are now in heaven, who had no idea the impact that they were making on my life. They were just doing their lives and they were serving God. And then as a minister, the many people who came beside me, they truly are part of my cloud of witnesses. All these people of different ages taught me how to do life and how to do ministry in everyday ways. And they never knew that they were heroes. They were just Miss Lambert or Miss Holman or Miss Lee. They were just people who were doing their lives and helped me do my life that was much more reflective of how God wants us to live.
I can't put into words the impact that so many people at Dawson have had on me and my family over the years. It's very humbling, and we're grateful to have been a part of it.
I'm very grateful to have those role models that push me towards Jesus all the time. And that's like, the refrain is like, look to Jesus, look to Jesus. And I think I'm very grateful to have that as well.
God has been faithful to take what we have done and multiply it, to bless it and do much more with it than we ever could have imagined that we could possibly do with it.
My hope for Dawson in the future would be that we be faithful to make disciples and reach people for Christ, but that we not be bound by the way we always did it, that we would not be afraid to try some new things and to try to find new ways to reach people, because I think more than ever now people need Jesus.
I will not be alive, but I cannot wait to see what God will do with the Dawson family of faith in the next 100 years. When you see all that God has done with mere people full of sin and faults, what He has been able to do through the family of faith at Dawson, it's His family, it's His kingdom.
One of the joys of serving a church that has 100 years of history is that you have men and women who have been able to testify to God's faithfulness through difficulty and through joy. Nothing exists for 100 years without some turns and some twists. And in the life of a church like Dawson, we can look back and to see how God's faithfulness has been the guiding point. And here we have an opportunity as a church now, as we celebrate 100 years, not to look back nostalgically at the past and to say the best days are behind us, or to conjure up this idea that we had our height of success in this moment or this time. But is to say, in this moment, God, what are you calling us to in these next chapters? What are the horizons of discipleship and worship and missions that you are calling us to be found faithful in now and in the days to come? And what I'm excited about is, as I can look back, I can see how God has written this story and how God is writing the story, and I look forward to the chapters that He's going to write ahead in the days to come.
All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow.